Welcome to the Savvy Shopkeeper Retail Podcast. I'm your host, Kathy Cruz. I'm a former brick and mortar store owner turned retail expert who is passionate about entrepreneurship and has experienced the highs and lows of running a retail business. Whether you're a seasoned retail veteran or an aspiring store owner, consider me your guide on this store owning journey. If you're looking to run a profitable and growing business that doesn't drain you, follow my 6 stages of shopkeeping and subscribe to this show. Join me for a journey of continuous learning where protecting your mind, maximizing profit, and determining your own schedule are a priority. Get ready to work smarter, profit more, and grow your retail business. Welcome to episode 224 of the Savvy Shopkeeper Retail Podcast, the science behind entrepreneurial emotions with Master Certified Coach Neill Williams. I'm your host, Kathy Cruz. So in today's episode, I interviewed my own coach, Neill. I can't believe we're at episode 224, and I don't think I've brought her onto this podcast. Prior to becoming a life coach, Neill had a full-time career, and she ditched her own belief that success was measured by the number of hours worked. Neill was able to achieve true lifestyle freedom while juggling her role as a mom, a wife, master certified coach, entrepreneur, and employee. Now she helps thriving female entrepreneurs grow their businesses using 10 hours a week. And recently, in the middle of one of my own coaching sessions, Neill mentioned the behavior of economics, in particular, what she referred to as the Trifecta of No. And I immediately asked her if she would hop on the podcast and share this knowledge with all of you. I knew having her explain this would be incredibly helpful to hundreds and thousands of store owners. In this episode, you'll hear how much I appreciate Neill's love of science. When she coaches me, she often has a scientific explanation for what I'm experiencing. And every time she does this, I'm chuckling because I feel this. I feel validated. I feel seen. I feel like I have a better understanding of what my mind is experiencing as I navigate entrepreneurship, because we all know it is a roller coaster ride. I genuinely hope you appreciate this episode and Neill's wisdom. For some of you, you'll listen to this episode more than once, and I hope you do, because if you do, that means you're onto something. You're onto something within yourself. Here's my interview with Neill. Neill, I'm so excited to have you on the podcast today. I said at the beginning in the intro that you are my own coach. I adore you. I appreciate you, everything that you've done with me, for me. And we were in conversation during one of my coaching sessions where I was talking about the economy and inflation and things that are happening now and how it's affecting store owners. Because of course, I need to talk to you about things that are going in my own mind and how to support my community. And when that came up, you immediately started talking about some concepts, I guess, things that I wasn't aware of. And one of the many things I love about you is that every time I talk to you and kind of unpack what's happening in my brain, you come back at me with some scientific explanation. You love the science. And that's exactly what happened. So, Neill, first, before we get into that, because I want everyone to know what you were sharing, because it started to blow my mind. And I thought, oh my gosh, my community really needs to hear this. Why don't you tell everyone about your journey into becoming a coach and what you do? Because I really want them to understand what you do.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I just want to say you are one of my dearest clients. I so value our relationship, and I just am so grateful that we've had the journey we've had together, because we've been together for many years. Your audience might not know that, but we have really been together for probably 4 or 5 years, like quite a long time. And I feel like that relationship has just deepened. And what I love about you is that you are so good at just taking coaching and diving deeper with it and really wanting more, understanding the science behind it, which I think a lot of us actually do want to know that. We don't necessarily know we want to know that, but the way that I try to provide it in the coaching that I do is that so people understand that they make sense, that there's always a reason, it's always logical why we do what we do, why we think the way we think, the reason that we feel the way that we do. Because I think so many of us have so much self-judgment around, I shouldn't feel that way, or I shouldn't have thought that, or I shouldn't have said that to that person. And I want to just relieve that there's always a reason why. Doesn't mean that it excuses this, but it also doesn't mean we place blame or judgment on ourselves for it. So that's kind of like where I come from it. So there's basically 3 different disciplines of science. And yes, I am a science nerd. I have a master's in mathematics and economics. And, I was an actuary in the corporate world, which everybody can just Google, because I feel like that's like the Chandler Bing career. That's who I was in my friend group. But the way that I come at it is really from behavior, right? So really like looking at what is the science behind behavior. So there's psychology behind that, there's neuroscience behind that, and there's something that is really an area that I really love is behavior economics. And that's really, in the way that I simplify it in my mind, is I just think about that area as the science behind how we make decisions. And so that's kind of the concepts that I brought to our discussion that one day that you were like, oh my gosh, I would love it if you just talked to my audience about this. So that's kind of like the frame up of where that all comes from.
And it did just naturally come in conversation because I talk about, me coaching and me teaching my community. And I don't remember exactly the context or why I brought it up, but I just really love that you immediately went into, there's an explanation for that. You know, how there's a lot of conversation amongst store owners. I heard it when I was, when I speak at conferences or when I'm in my membership group or when we're on Zoom calls. And plus, it's all over the media, right? And the one thing that I mentioned before we started recording is I don't want to dismiss the things that are happening in the economy. I mean, it's very clear that there is inflation going on. And I just told Neill before we started recording a story about my own mom where her hot water tank broke and she was in a pure panic about it. She's used to just taking care of herself. First, I had to remind her, listen, you have a lot of people that love you that help to take care of you. But if she were on her own, that would have been either impossible to replace or it would have been a financial struggle. I'm sure it could have been, financially hurtful to her. It would have been a struggle. So I think it's really important for me to acknowledge that I understand that there are things going on in the economy. I also understand that it affects everyone differently. While, Neill, what did you say about vacation? Like for some of us.
Yeah. It's just that we don't go on vacation. We buy food instead. Like for me, even, I feel like we do quite well. My husband and I were a dual income family. We have 1 child. And I look around in my community and I think, I don't know how the hell people are making it half the time, right? Like the cost of food and the cost of healthcare, at least for us, those are huge budget items for us. So what do we decide to do? Yeah, we just vacation less, or we just take, lower cost vacations or things like that. It's like, it's affecting our life in some way, but it's not affecting our survival, which I see that is like a real legit thing that is happening in our country, in probably across the world in many different countries. And you and I are on the same page. We don't want to minimize that. That literally is actually happening. And we have very little control over the inflation and all of those things. But what we do have control is our reaction to it, which is why Kathy and I got into coaching, really, basically, is what we like to help people with.
Yeah. And you inspired me to be a coach because I saw how helpful it was for me. So I want to say thank you to that. So let's go ahead and start to unpack this because I chuckle because I just really appreciate the science part of your brain. You threw out 3 terms or concepts at me, all under like an umbrella concept, I think.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that and how it's related to everything that's happening in the economy. Plus, it's an election year, and we know historically election years can cause wonky results. It doesn't necessarily mean that store owners will lose sales or dip in sales, but it definitely creates an inconsistent pattern that independent retailers aren't used to. So before November gets here, and as this year moves forward and store owners are experiencing all this and reading so much in the media, I really want you to explain how it can be helpful to understand what's going on in their brains around this and what they can do about it.
Yeah. So the three concepts, I'll explain those, and they're really easy to, it's not like we're going to be super scientific here. We're going to use very easy to understand examples, but I want to frame it up under the umbrella. The umbrella of it is how we as humans respond to change. And we can either respond to change in a really positive way, or we can respond to change in a way that we're super resistant and we're just fighting. And these three concepts kind of work together in the answer to why we approach change the way that we do. And if you think about it, I mean, as entrepreneurs, anybody who's a business owner, you literally are confronted with change every single day. Change you can't control, change you didn't know was going to happen. Like you're faced with this every single day, most likely. And I think as the human experience is a constant sea of change, right? Things didn't happen. People react in a way. Somebody loses a job. We have inflation. I mean, all the things that we can't control, right? So that's why I brought these three topics to our conversation, was because it really is about change. And what we really love to do, I mean, I don't know about you, Kathy, but for me, like, I would love if I could just control everything. And then it was like the change I decided that I wanted. Right?
And everyone. Can we control everything and everyone?
Yes. Unfortunately, life doesn't work that way, at least not on this planet.
This episode is brought to you by the Savvy Shopkeeper Quiz. After years of research and learning from thousands of retailers, I determined there are 6 stages of shopkeeping. But what's more important is knowing the action steps store owners can take during each stage. These steps can help you focus, create efficiency, and improve profitability so you can grow. Take the quiz to find out which shopkeeper stage you're in. Plus, you'll get a helpful and customized list of podcast episodes and 2 free resources specifically for the stage you're in now. I reference the stages often in podcast episodes and when I teach online, so it's helpful to know which stage you're in. Visit savvyshopkeeper.com/quiz to take the quiz.
So the 3 concepts that really help us understand our own reaction to change, whether we embrace it or we fight it, are the endowment effect, loss aversion, and status quo bias.
Okay.
So these kind of like, you'll see, once we describe them and give examples, you see how they kind of interplay together. So the loss, let's take loss aversion first. So this is the painful part of change for many of us, because a loss psychologically feels twice as bad as a gain. So let's just give it as an example. Let's say you have a month in your retail business where you meet your revenue goal, let's say, and that's going to feel amazing.
Yes.
Okay. The next month, you don't meet it. That is going to feel very painful. And you'll probably notice your brain wanting to spin out on the 1 month of not making it. And you completely forget. Maybe you've hit your revenue goals for the last 2 or 3 months in a row, but that doesn't even matter, because that loss is way more painful, way more salient in your brain. It's the thing that you're going to be focused on the most. It's just like the same reason why, if you're on social media, why we get so spun up and caught up in negative comments over positive comments, right? Because that pain of loss is way more intense, and that's what we tend to focus on rather than the joy of getting.
Okay, so this is going to relate in so many ways, like beyond just what's happening this year with election and economy and inflation. I mean, a lot of people are probably maybe not necessarily surprised because we feel that pain, right? Like we feel the pain, but I don't think I've ever heard it quantified that way. Like it's double the pain. And that's a
Yeah.
lot. It also does explain, like you can see, I can look on my testimonial board for Savvy
Yes.
Shopkeeper and I see hundreds of like incredible testimonials, but then I see the one negative comment and
Right.
it'll send you down, it could send someone down
100%.
a downward spiral. So that makes sense. It's
100%.
just going to feel heavier.
Totally. I mean, I just had this situation last week and I have to chuckle at myself because I know it and I still get caught in it, right? Like
Yes.
I'm still a human, even though I know how it works. I had a couple of renewals for one-on-one clients coming up, and I think 2 out of the 3 renewed. Do you know what happened to my brain about the one that didn't renew? Complete spiral. I couldn't even go to sleep that night. I had so much anxiety, right? So it happens to all of us, even when we know that it's happening. So I just want people to understand, like, this is what happens at the subconscious level. And this is really what behavior economics is all about, is really looking at the decisions that our brain makes without us consciously knowing that we make them. We like to think we're really logical creatures, but we're only logical maybe 10% of the time. And that's being generous. Most of the time, like 90% of our decisions and our behaviors and all that come at the subconscious level because we have so much we have to process. We couldn't possibly bring everything up to the conscious brain. So that's important for everybody to understand. It's happening below the surface of consciousness mostly.
And I appreciate that. I also appreciate whenever you remind me that my thinking is
Yeah.
natural human behavior. It literally, when you say that or when you explain something like loss aversion, my shoulders dip a little bit. Like I
Yes.
feel a little more relaxed. I don't feel as tense because I'm not busy beating myself up for that thinking, right? It's happening
Totally.
subconsciously. And sometimes the awareness is helpful. Okay, so that was number one. What's number
Yes.
two?
So number 2 is something called the endowment effect. And the best example that I have of this is people who, and it's really like we overvalue what we own. Okay. So we think what we own is worth way more than it actually is. You see this happen in team members that I coach on this all the time. People overvalue the contribution of a team member because they are already on their team. We overvalue relationships. I mean, this isn't like the best friend that I could have, but I already have a friend. That's probably better than not having a friend. And then the one that I think hits home the most is if you've ever done this or you know of anybody who's ever done this, they put their house on the market and they're like, this house is worth $1 million. When really Zillow was like, it's worth 375.
Yeah.
You know, so we overvalue the things that we own. And so when we're thinking about our businesses, sometimes this keeps us stuck because we are like, okay, this way of doing business, I'm valuing it more because it's the way that I know how to do business.
Mm.
And so we think that the thing that we have is better than the thing that we don't have. It's really interesting to look at because if you can get yourself, you can sell yourself on applying the endowment effect for the change that's happening, you're gonna use this whole trifecta, we call it, these 3 concepts, to make it easier for you to embrace change. So the whole idea is, how do I leverage the endowment effect towards the change that I want to have instead of against the change that is happening?
Meaning during times like this, when buying
Yes.
patterns are different, or people
Yes.
are doing things different, or spending differently, what can you do to get
Right.
customers to shop with you? It is a
Yes.
change in behavior, in business behavior. That's so interesting. Now, let me add this. The second Neill mentioned, I think you said it was the trifecta of no, is the
Yes, I call
umbrella.
it the
Okay.
trifecta of no. Yeah.
So
Yep.
when you first brought up the trifecta of no and you mentioned these 3, I immediately stopped you during the conversation and said,
Yes.
can we please save this for a podcast episode? So we haven't really unpacked it until now. So
Yeah.
it's news to me too, even though I did a little bit of research on each. What I appreciate is you always explain it in normal people terms. And you give an example. So just giving the example for a retail store owner that the endowment effect means being open to changing the way you've done things before. Maybe it's time to change it up. Maybe it just means for 2024 and 2025 might go back. Like who knows, but being open to it.
Yeah, especially the way that I think about it, Kathy, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you've told me that this cycle happens for retail owners every political cycle. So it's not like this is a one-time thing. So the way that I'd be thinking about it is, okay, what is the most effective way for me to run my business during an election year? That's what I want to own here, right? Because then I know for the next political cycle how I'm going to operate. Versus fighting like, oh, this is a terrible year and everything's just going to be down and,
And and then add the other layers, right? Add inflation, add what the news is saying about the economy. And there's a lot of back and forth on the economy, but it can become a really vicious cycle in our brains. And again, I just thought it was so important for you to come on here and talk about this. Okay, so now we know that the umbrella concept is the trifecta of no. You talked about loss aversion, the endowment effect. What's the third one?
So the third leg, and you can think of it like a little triangle and they all kind of like work together. So the third leg of it is the status quo bias. This is something that many people are probably familiar with. We hear a lot about the status quo, but this is like continuing to do the same thing that we've always done just because we know how to do that thing, or it feels more predictable or more certain what the outcomes will be based on that. And in a situation like this, so we're talking specifically as it relates to retail businesses, if we continue to operate your business in the same way you always have during a political year when the marketplace and environmental conditions are different, you're probably not going to get the same results, right? But we're expecting that to happen. So then when we don't, then we feel the pain of not getting those feels very intense. So you can see how this all works together, right? Like the endowment effect is, this is the way that I've always done business. It must be the right way. We're overvaluing it. We're doing the same things, expecting the same outcomes, except for the marketplace maybe is different, is not primed for those outcomes. And then we feel terrible because we have this loss aversion that's happening. So it kind of like, you can see how all the three legs kind of like play together and why we end up so resistant to change. That's what it means when I say trifecta of no, like it's no to change. Like I'm not changing, right? Versus opening up and being a yes to the change.
Yeah, it absolutely makes sense. And I wish we could like continue this podcast episode and do like a whole series on how everyone can change, right? But I know there's such a variety of store owners in my community and that listen to the podcast. It's going to be different for everyone, but I think the message here is identify what's going on in the brain if this is happening to you. Understand that there are reasons for what's happening in your brain. And then if you're willing to, and if you want, and you want to make sure that you get good results out of your business, be willing to make changes if and when necessary.
Yeah. And I think the big thing here is understanding that if you can sell yourself on the endowment effect of yes to the change, like owning the change, the future that is possible by opening up to this change or being, at least open to considering it, you're going to save yourself a lot of the pain of loss. And I call it a little bit insanity, right? The insanity of I'm just going to keep doing the things that I've always done, even though I know they're not working for me. And you're going to have a better outcome overall. Number one, it's just going to be, you're going to figure out how to navigate change in a more effective way, not just in business, but in any of your areas of life, which really, in my opinion, all of that matters more than the business part of it. So the business is just like a little playground for us to learn how to do the rest of this with life.
This episode is brought to you by my free resource, Tools of the Retail Trade Resource Guide, a 28-page downloadable resource filled with software, tools, and equipment recommendations just for brick and mortar retail store owners. Learn what I use and what other store owners are using. Visit savvyshopkeeper.com/resources. That's savvyshopkeeper.com/resources and sign up for my newsletter to get the guide. And I feel like the one thing that we talk about a lot in coaching and in you coaching me and me also coaching others is our thinking. And when you're in that trifecta of no, I feel like, people use like the analogy of like being forced into a box. It's like when you're in that
Yes.
triangle and you're
Yes.
having all of the negative thinking, you can't break free from that triangle. It's really hard to break free, and that can send people into the downward spiral. And I think that's what I'm trying to convey is, if that's you, if you're slipping into that, how do we get you out of that triangle? Let's bring you out into the open and
Yeah.
exploring ideas of what you can do. And again, it doesn't mean that whatever changes you implement are long term. They could be temporary. They could be just for the season. They could be just for the year. And who knows, like maybe you implement a change that hits it out of the ballpark and your business grows exponentially because of it. Like 2025 could look really different because of that. So I even like the idea of just exploring that for your business to see what can come of it.
Yeah. And I think it's really helpful also for people to get, more awareness of how this is actually playing out by looking at it. Like, what are the pieces that I'm feeling a lot of emotional pain around, whether it's in your business or something else? What am I overvaluing? Like, if you thought about with a team, for instance, like, would you hire this person again? Your answer is no. It's like, well, you're probably overvaluing them, right? So just taking a peek at that. And then also, what are the things that I keep doing and expecting the same results? Like really diving into what is that behavior? What does that look like? Where am I actually stuck? And I think it's important first to really understand how this is all playing out before we try to go and change it. Because if we don't understand, that's going to be really hard to make change.
I think that's a great point, because one of my favorite things to do, and if people have been listening to this podcast for a while, or if they're in Master Shopkeepers, they know this, but I love just a good old thought dump, just dumping everything in my brain around where I am stuck. So there was one session where you and I had, and I tell this story all the time in Master Shopkeepers. I don't know if I told it here on the podcast, but there was one session that we had around money mindset. I grew up in a really poor home. My mom is incredible. She's amazing, but we were poor. We were raised on welfare by a single mom who had to learn English. And I had a lot of money mindset thoughts, definitely scarcity, where I felt like there just was never going to be enough money. I would never have enough money. I would always be poor. And I remember one time you said, okay, for your homework, go ahead and just dump all of your thoughts around money. And I thought, Neill, this is early on. I thought, Neill, that's so silly. Like, why would I do that? There's only one thought, and the thought is, I'm poor and I'm always going to be poor. Like it's just simple, oversimplifying it. So I went, and I'm pretty good about my homework, and I went ahead and did it. And I remember I dumped so many thoughts onto one piece of paper. I was turning the paper sideways. I still have it. I was turning the paper sideways because I had so many thoughts. It was like, so-and-so said this, someone did that. I felt this, I experienced this. This was a moment, when we didn't have, a lot of food at the end of the month in the house, or I had to make, spaghetti with a can of tomato sauce, or, it just started pouring out of me. And I guess that's my point, is don't underestimate some alone time by yourself, just pen and paper, and get that all out of your head. Because once you see it, and once you read it, and once you get it out, it's like, okay, what can I do about this? How can I change this?
Totally. And I think, to your point, it's so powerful, right? And that's why I think a lot of us as coaches are kind of like addicted to like the journaling and like all of that. Like, I love a good question. Give me a good question. I have a whole I have a whole bank of questions, and I just give myself one every day and I journal about it. But I think sometimes when you're first new and exposed to this work, maybe you don't even know, like, I have no idea what my thoughts are, right? So one thing that I have people do who have trouble getting at the thought level is to really look at their behaviors. It's much easier for us to see what it is we're doing and to write that down. Oh, I did this, I made this decision. And it's really important to understand that every behavior you have is logical based on the psychology that it was derived from. So it always makes sense at some level. And if you have a hard time accessing the psychological level, maybe look at the behavior first. And then you start to look at, okay, what are the patterns of behavior here? Why is that happening? What is going on that led me to make this same kind of decision 14 times in a row? And I see this is the result of that, right? So even looking at the behavior level as a beginning step can be really powerful as well.
Yeah, recently I have a good story around this. I have a one-on-one client that I was talking to, and her buying behavior changed. I'll save the details around it, but her buying behavior changed, and she was wondering why she was down 20%. And when she looked at her buying patterns and what she had in inventory, her inventory was down 20%, right? So that's a really good example of what behavior are you exhibiting that you may not realize what's happening until you actually pay attention to the behavior. And we started working on our numbers and unpacking that. She was like, oh, well, no wonder why I'm down 20%. I have 20% less inventory. And they aren't always in equal balance, right? But that's a really good example of if somebody's wondering and listening and they're like, what do you mean by behavior? There are hundreds of behaviors in a retail business. Did you stop email marketing? Are you not posting? Are you not showing up live on social media? Are your buying patterns changing? Are you not paying attention to your financials? Are you like so many things that we do in terms of
Yeah.
behavior that we could look at?
Totally. And I think one of the other important points is all of that. I would bet for that one-on-one client, that was all subconscious. She didn't
Yes.
even know that that's what she was doing until you asked her to slow down and bring it to the conscious level so you could look at it. And that's the whole point of this, right? Is that we're just going to keep running on autopilot, and it's not wrong. There's always a reason for it. It's always logical. But if we want to elevate ourselves in our lives and in our businesses, we do need to take a hot second to slow down and analyze and really bring to the conscious level the things that we're doing, the ways that we're thinking, the behavior that we are exhibiting.
And that right there is going to be like a big mic drop moment for some people. So if you're multitasking, and people always laugh at me when I say this, and they're like, Kathy, I love when you do this. If you're multitasking, stop. What's happening is so many of us, all business owners, but I know for sure in particular store owners, so on autopilot, just doing the same thing over and over and over and over again. And we fill our plates and we fill our brains that we don't pause. And when you pause and give yourself, I say that all the time to master shopkeepers, go to a coffee shop, just take an hour to yourself. Even if it means giving you CEO time, reviewing your numbers, doing an exercise, or watching a master class that, there you have access to as a replay, or attending something live in Master Shopkeepers. I always say, pause to do it, because it's
Yep.
really enlightening what will happen and what you'll learn if you just give yourself that time. And we will tell ourselves we don't have the time, but that's not true. So once you realize what is a priority, you will make the time. But I just think that's going to be a huge moment for some people. They're like, oh, Kathy and Neill, you're telling me I need to stop and listen to myself? I didn't realize that.
Yeah, and the reason is, just so everybody knows, 90 to 99% of our decisions, and our decisions precede our behaviors, are at the subconscious level. So our subconscious brain is just making these decisions without us really realizing it. And those decisions are based on rules of thumb and shortcuts, like the trifecta is just one of those shortcuts that the brain uses, past experiences. And so we literally, you've heard this before, and it's true. you just keep creating the same experience for yourself over and over and over again if you don't bring some of that to the conscious level and really start looking at it. And that's what we're talking about here. And that's why having a coach like Kathy is so powerful, is she can help you bring those things to the conscious level and really take a look at them.
And if you didn't catch it, Neill just did it again. She doesn't even realize she does this. She did it again, and she explained that 90+% of our thoughts happen subconsciously. Like, she gave another scientific explanation for what's going on. I love it.
And just so you know, it's so in my subconscious, I didn't even know that I did
I know.
Yeah.
Well, Neill, I really, really genuinely appreciate this. Why don't you share, because you didn't really say, what you do. I mean, obviously you are a certified master coach, which I covered in the intro, but what is it that you're doing now, and who is it that you're teaching? And tell everyone about your podcast and how they can connect with you.
Yeah, so I have made a couple changes in my business, and I don't know at the time of this is going to come out. I'll send a link and we can put it in the show notes. But I wrote a book, so it's called the 10-Hour Week Method. That might be a really fun. It's like a $4 book. You can pick it up. Really on productivity and time management, and diving into the science behind time. One of the things that I really want to do with my career is help people heal their relationship with time and stop blaming it and using it against themselves. So that's really what that book is about. And so in addition to that, we are also now training entrepreneurs with teams how to get their teams to run their businesses for them. So we have a program called Team 90, which is 90 days to get your team to run 90% of your business for you, is kind of like the promise. And it's all of this science stuff. But again, like Kathy and I are talking, we very distilled down, very easy to implement. And the whole idea behind that program is really, I think entrepreneurs have the ability to really deeply impact the world. And my hope and desire is that with this program, we'll start to have some healthier work environments. And so that's the work that I'm doing.
Healthy is key. That's the key.
The
Where
key.
can everyone listen to your podcast, and where can they find you online?
Yeah, so Success Genius is the name of the podcast, and they can listen to that anywhere that they listen to their regular podcasts. Every week there is a lot of science, but again, just like Kathy and I are talking about, it's really applicable, easy to understand. Hopefully it helps you make sense of yourself, and you understand yourself to be very logical, and helps you to maybe make change if you want to do that. So you can find me there. Other ways, you could go to my website, neillwilliams.com, grab our free productivity toolkit, and then you'll be on my email list.
And I just want to add that when you said whatever you teach will help make sense of yourself, I think that is one of the most helpful, I guess, lessons I've learned from working with you is once I'm aware, I'm so much kinder to myself and more compassionate to myself. And I don't do that mental beat up, right? Where I'm just like beating myself up for thinking what I think or feeling what I feel and being angry about those emotions. I'm so much nicer to myself when I'm aware. And I think that's what I hope people get out of this particular episode, is being aware of what's happening and why it's happening in your brain. And then when you realize, man, you barely can control 90% of your thoughts, no wonder why we're all struggling.
Thank you for saying that, Kathy. That is something that's really important to me, is that I just feel like there's enough pain in the world.
Yes.
We don't need to be inflicting pain on ourselves. All we really need to do is understand ourselves better. And I think that pain just falls away.
That is the perfect way to end this episode. Neill, I love you dearly. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It was so fun.